Hi, I'm Kathleen Hamilton. I'm from KathleenHamiltonMemoir.com, and I'm the creator of a Deeper Truth memoir programs. And this is day 4 of the 12 gifts of memoir. So, what I'm talking about in this series is the gifts that the writer receives in the course of her journey in writing a Deeper Truth memoir. So, what are the benefits and rewards of writing your deeper truth story? Um, People ask me this often because I think a lot of people a lot of people want to write a book. Apparently, 3 out of 5 people want to write a book, but most people never do. And we're well acquainted with the things that keep us from writing, but I wanted to share in this series, what are the benefits and the rewards. Um, so these are the gifts that the writer receives when she reads out loud in a writing program, when she has her story witnessed and validated, first by her mentor and her writing sisters, and then later if she goes on to publish, when her story is received by her readers. So this is day 4, and we've already covered some very rich territory in days 1 through 3. And I invite you to watch those videos on the replay if you haven't already seen them. So on day 1, I talked about the gift of being heard, understood, and liked. And when you read a memoir, you feel like you really know the writer, and you feel like she's your friend. And Roxane Gay talks about that, actually. She talks about how, people read her. She's, very successful memoirist. People read her memoirs and they read her. Hi, Katie. Roxane Gay, people read her memoirs and her personal essays, and they come up to her all the time and give her hugs. And it's funny because she doesn't actually like being hugged. But, people feel like they know her, and they may not always agree with her, but still, that's how it is for writers. When we put our work out there, people do get to know us and understand us and like us. And so for the writer, that's a great reward, to feel and to know that you've been heard and understood and liked, even if people don't necessarily, share your perspective. They still really appreciate that you've shown up and that you've been really honest and you've been unapologetically yourself, right? We like people who do that, especially we like women who do that, because it's rare and it's refreshing, and it's the direction that we're all heading in. It's what we need to do. It's what we're called to do now, and what the planet needs us to do. Is to show up and be honest and be unapologetically ourselves. So that was the first day, the first gift. Hi, Carla. And yay, Katie, yes, I'm so happy that you're here. So yeah, we like you for using your voice and being yourself. So on day 2, I talked about the gift of validation and how we all have a fundamental need, a fundamental human need, to have our truth validated and not violated. And I also talked about the discernment that you need to practice, and what is the safe container that you need to put in place so that when you do write your truth, you actually receive support and validation for that. I shared on day 3 what I think of as the holy grail of memoir, which is the gift of empowerment. And Katie, feel free to type in the comments, because you have gone through um, uh, a couple of programs with me, and you have written your deeper truth stories in the new book that was just published by Acorn Press. We shaped these stories until they shone like pearls, and Acorn Press was willing to go to all of the work and expense of publishing the book, because these stories are so wonderful. So, but what I'm saying, Katie, is that you have some experience and wisdom to share here too. So please pop in to the comments anytime something resonates with you, or you have an insight to share. So yeah, for me, women's empowerment is kind of the holy grail of memoir. It's why I do what I do in my work to support women to write memoir. Basically because I want to empower women to use their voices. I'm kind of on a mission, to be honest. I'm on a mission to have women excavate their voices and use them, and to tell the truth about their lives. And the Dalai Lama has famously said that the world will be saved by the Western woman. And I have a modification to that. I believe that the world will be saved by the Western woman who speaks up. And we start by telling the truth about our lives. So that's kind of my stake in the ground, empowerment. And that was the third, that was what I talked about on day 3, was empowerment. Women's voices have been silenced for so long that we've all kind of internalized the sexism of the culture. Even those of us who, are, been on the planet 57 years like myself, feminists, strong women, successful, there's a lot that we've internalized. So to the point where, we honestly don't even understand the extent to which we have been silenced. And this process that I teach in Deeper Truth Memoir helps us to access our voice. And, it's not our fault that we're so disconnected from our voice. But our work really now is to find our voice and use it. And believe me, you do have a voice, and you do have stories and wisdom to share, and you do have a perspective. You do have inner knowings about what's okay and what's not okay. And we need your voice. Yeah. So that's that's kind of my reason for, my big why for leading memoir programs and helping women to get their work out in the world. So today is day 4. And today I'm actually going to combine and talk about the next 3 gifts. So I'm covering gifts 4, 5, and 6 today because I feel like they're so interrelated. And I want to go deep into sharing some of my story with you as well. So writing memoir has so many rewards for the writer. And I want to say that these gifts are not usually the reasons why we write. They aren't our motivation per se, but nevertheless, they are the rewards. And they're kind of like the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, or the elixir with which you return after your hero's journey, your artist's journey of writing a deeper truth memoir. So these are the gifts that you get to bring home with you, home to yourself, and embody. So the gifts that I'm talking about today are healing the past, transforming shame into compassion, and dissolving secrets. So those are the three gifts, and I'm going to talk about them sort of together. So healing the past, transforming shame into compassion, and dissolving secrets. So first, I have a confession that I want to confide to you. And this feels vulnerable for me to admit, but hopefully by the time I'm done, you'll understand. I've actually never talked about this before. I'm just starting to own it and understand it myself. And here's the thing about writing. If you have trained yourself to go deep in your writing, you discover things that you didn't know. So you think when you sit down to write, you might think that you know what you're going to write, but if you go deep, you will discover things that you didn't know. And that's what happened to me when I wrote about the topic of, I sat down this morning to write about the topic of healing. Healing as a gift of memoir. I made these discoveries. So here's my confession. Until very recently, I had a snobbish, kind of dismissive, kind of negative attitude about writing memoir as a way of healing, which is bizarre when you know that writing stories from my life has been my medicine. And I'm not saying that I haven't also had therapy. I have had therapy. And I do recommend therapy for anyone who has, an emotional wound. And but writing memoir has taken me so much deeper into healing than therapy ever did. And it's a lot more fun. I think because it's creative. And I think because in writing memoir, we're working on the level of story. We're creating a story. And the story is our connective tissue, right? It's how we connect heart to heart as human beings. And story is how we understand and make meaning of the world and our lives. And so story is how we make sense of things. So I think that's, hey, Sherry. So I think that's part of the reason that it's such a powerful medicine and such a powerful, it's not therapy, but it is very therapeutic. Katie, feel free to type in the comments if you found that to be true. But until recently, here's the dichotomy. But until recently, when it came to owning and valuing and speaking about the healing power of memoir, I think, see if you can relate to this, I think that I was kind of like a gay person who's homophobic, right? Or, someone who has internalized racism, so they make derogatory comments about their own kind. It's kind of like that, kind of has that flavor to it. So I'm confessing right from the top that I strongly resisted when it came time to talk about memoir and teach memoir. I strongly resisted the idea of memoir as a way of healing. And to be honest, healing kind of, like that term healing, when it was applied to writing memoir, it kind of offended my ego. and my professional writer and editor's sensibility. And stay with me, I'll try to explain why this makes sense. Because, I originally came from journalism, and then I moved into writing screenplays and poetry and stage plays. And so my orientation was all about creating literary art or professional quality writing. So that even if a writer in my program didn't choose to publish, and not everybody wants to publish, but the work would be good enough to attract a publisher, to interest a publisher. So I was all about the literary merit of memoir. And, in my defense, even though I loved reading memoir and personal intimate stories, I had taken some heat from my professional colleagues that memoir or true stories were somehow inferior to fiction. And that's an attitude that's changed a lot. It just very recently in the last few years, but particularly like 15, 20 years ago when I was first writing memoir. The idea was that if you did use your own experience in your writing, that you should hide that. You should keep it a secret. And I remember I wrote a play called Blonde Moments, and my dramaturge advised me to never tell anyone that it was based on my life, right? Hi, Barbara. And Stella, hello. Thanks for being here. So I got the message, too, that it was somehow cheating to use your truth instead of your imagination in your writing, or that it was self-indulgent to write your own stories instead of someone else's, right? Of course, it's far more widely accepted now that memoir is a legitimate form, and many of our best novelists are writing memoir now, and they all acknowledge how difficult it is to write memoir. But it's kind of like when photography first came out. This was before my time. Okay, I'm not that old, but I have studied this. And apparently when photography first came out, it wasn't recognized as a legitimate art form. It was considered to be by the art snobs, it was considered to be a lesser form because it wasn't an oil painting. Like, think about that. Crazy, right? So I had absorbed a lot of judgment from the culture and from my writing communities and from mentors that I respected. And so when I started teaching memoir, when I came out as a memoirist and a memoir expert, I heard people say, and if I heard people say things to me like, "Oh, memoir, that must be very healing," or "Oh, that must be cathartic," I kind of bristled because I thought they were insulting me. Right? So, and even up until a couple of years ago, when I would tell people, that I support women to write their deeper truth stories, sometimes people would ask if the purpose was for healing. And I would say no. Because I felt kind of defensive about that. I was keeping it a secret. And the truth is that I have always been most attracted to true stories. Like when I was a little girl, The Diary of Anne Frank just shattered me in the best way. You know what I mean? And the other book that I really loved. I mean, I read all the time. Reading was my yeah, my survival really. Um, and that's another reason why I think that it's such a gift when we're generous enough to write our own stories, because I know how much it meant and means to me to read someone's story. Anyway, what was I saying? Oh, Huckleberry Finn. Yeah, like because it was written first person as if it was memoir, right? So these types of stories always attracted me and sort of like resonated really strongly with me, to read someone's true experience. And, and I've always felt too that stories from my own life were far more fascinating and compelling to me than anything that I could make up. And I've had experience of trying to sort of like, you know, change my stories and fictionalize them, so that they would fit a different model. And, it was kind of like wearing jeans that are a couple sizes too small, just not comfortable. And oh, Katie, so I'm just reading. I completely understand your perspective on healing and writing in the past and telling the truth. I think there's a huge awakening happening across the world right now. Yes, absolutely. So you are bravely leading a movement. Yes, in my own corner of the world, I am. Yes. The experience has been so ultimately healing for me. I'm so glad. I'm so glad to hear that. And you know what? I'm going to talk about this more, but it can't not heal you. That's the thing. It might not be the reason that we write, but it's definitely a byproduct. I've always been a fan of truth, and I can't wait to tell my next story. Yes, absolutely. It helps so much to let it go and be more present in who I am now. Yes, because when you own your story, you own your life, and then you can show up more powerfully in the world, show up more powerfully in your family, show up more powerfully in your community. Absolutely. Oh, Katie, thank you for sharing that. Yeah. So, oh, and this is interesting too. So, my friend Donna Morrissey, I'm sure most of you have read her books, her novels, and one thing that she teaches is that it's part of our sort of self-development or career path, as writers, is to discover what kind of writer we are, right? So for me, even though I'm attracted to all like forms of writing, I'll call it forms, like, I love writing. I've loved writing screenplays. I've loved writing stage plays. I love poetry. It depends. I mean, certain material comes to me and it needs to be a poem, or it needs to be an essay, or it needs to be email. I love writing email. And but in all of those forms, what's true for me is that I like writing the truth. I go there. I always do. It's just kind of like that's the kind of writer that I am. So, yeah. So I'm a memoirist, and but in leading my memoir programs, I was all about the literary merit of the work, the quality of the writing. And I still stand behind that, of course. And Barbara says, so well said, Katie and Kathleen. I so agree. Yes, absolutely. And Barbara, you've written memoir too. I know that. And Barbara, we met when you came to my workshop in Halifax, and yeah. Thanks for being here. I know you'll have a lot to contribute to the conversation. Um, yeah, so I'm all about, and still am. I stand by my professional standards. Um, and Here's the thing: um, when you write using the method that I've created and that I teach, the Deeper Truth memoir method, you can't help but create really high quality work, high quality writing that connects instantly with a reader and a publisher. Um, but yeah, so even though, just to get back to the healing piece, so even though I have experienced profound healings in the course of writing memoir, and I know that I will continue to, as like layers of the onion, right? Like as soon as you get to a new level, there's a new, um, you know, there's new new areas for us to see and open up to and heal, so that we can become even more fully ourselves. But so even though I had experienced these profound healings myself, it's not how I wanted to talk about memoir. And I just need to take one quick moment to make an adjustment here so that I can follow my notes a little bit. I made these notes this morning, and I was just kind of like, wow, like I had no idea that I was even thinking some of these things, but there you go, I am. Yeah, I wanted to share a couple of examples of my own healing that's happened. And I know, like, if I brought Katie and the other 12 women who wrote memoir stories in this collection that just came out, if I brought each of them on, they would each be able to talk about their own healing that happened as a byproduct of writing their story. But I'm just going to talk about mine. So in the book that I'm working on now, I'm writing about my childhood. In part, I'm writing about my childhood and my experience of being mothered, and I'm also writing about my own experience of being a mother. So in writing about my childhood, here's the thing: like when I was young, I got labeled as a bad kid, a bad girl, when I was quite young. And my dad died when I was 3. And the story that I told myself about that was that I was too bad to deserve a dad. And I just believed that all my life. But in my early days of writing my early drafts of this memoir that I'm working on now, I found myself writing a memory of when I was quite young, maybe 4 years old. And it was a memory of discovering lilies of the valley at my Nana's house. Hey, Shani, hello. Nice to see you here. So, so in this scene, I discover lilies of the valley, and nothing really happens in the scene except that I'm completely enchanted as a 4-year-old by these delicate little flowers. So, and as a writer, I was thrilled with this scene that I had written. So I read this piece out loud in front of an audience in Halifax. And the response that I got was kind of lukewarm. Like, what was the point of the scene? You know, I could tell people were kind of thinking, so what? But what was important to me about that scene was that I had discovered a time when I was innocent. So it was proof that I was innocent. That's why it meant so much to me. And I thought that I needed to establish that in my book. But what I learned was that the reader didn't need proof that my 4-year-old character was innocent, right? Because everyone knows that a child is innocent. It was just me who needed to learn that. So that was healing for me. Another moment of healing came for me when I wrote about my first memory of stealing. So I needed to write this in the story because stealing eventually became a compulsion, later in my childhood and through into my teens. And I was deeply ashamed of that, as an adult. I always kept it a secret from people that I'd had a problem with shoplifting. Because, it's one of the worst things you can say about somebody, isn't it? That they're a thief. And in my family, that's how I got labeled. I was the bad kid, I was the liar, I was the thief. So in writing my memoir, I wanted to show the first time that I stole something. And this is something that I teach, by the way. If there's something that you're ashamed of, something that you regret, something that's a secret, or just a wounded place, write it. Dive straight into it. That's your gold. And you know what they say in the 12-step programs, that you're only as sick as your secrets, right? So I wrote a scene about the first time I stole. I stole a dime. And I was 7 years old, and I found my mother in bed with her boyfriend, and her boyfriend, Joe. And he was a man that I did not like. And I felt that he had stolen my mother from me. And I wanted compensation. So I stole a dime from, he had emptied his pockets the night before and put this change on my mother's dresser. And I saw it all there, and I took a dime. And, that discovery came through the process of writing, right? Because I just had this kind of who remembers because I told myself, go straight into it. What was the first time? And I went into it, and then I remembered what led up to it, what happened before, what happened afterwards. And it was very healing to me to know that I wasn't just bad. I was wounded and abandoned, and stealing was my way of taking care of myself. So because I wrote that scene, I was able to shift from feeling ashamed of myself to having compassion for myself. And, writing that scene and reading it out loud and telling that secret caused the shame to just kind of dissolve. So that's the kind of healing that I see happening again and again and again with writers in my program. It happens after they read out loud. It does make a difference to read out loud in a safe, supportive environment. Sometimes we write things and we don't really know what we wrote until we actually get to read it out loud and be witnessed and hear our own voices. This is the thing. It's like the writing, it's just between you and the page. And that's a beautiful thing. It's very intimate. You've connected with your deep inner self. and written the truth, and it just comes out, and it comes out so beautifully and perfectly. And then when you read aloud, you're connecting to your voice, like you're giving voice to your voice. And there's just nothing more powerful than that. It also happens, when I'm working one-on-one with writers, and we're working really closely, like sentence by sentence, paragraph by paragraph, and we're looking at what's the significance of this, what's the deeper meaning of this scene, of this moment? Why do you think it's there? Really, I have to say, it's been my students, it's been my writing clients who have kind of forced me to own the healing value of my programs, the healing value of writing a deeper truth memoir. Because again, I don't advertise my writing workshops as a way to heal. I do want my students to produce memoir that connects powerfully with readers and publishers, and my methods are designed to achieve that. But guess what? In the process of writing a deeper truth memoir, you can't help but heal. So a memoir story is the product, and healing is a byproduct. That's kind of how I've come to think about it. And one of my writers says that she got more healing even just a few days into my program than she'd received in years of therapy. And again, we talked a little bit about why that would be, working on the level of creativity, working on the level of story, giving voice, being witnessed. So that's kind of my confession, right? It's really only been the last year or so that I've started to own the healing value of what I teach in my programs. And for me to own and value that healing is in itself a layer of healing for me. In a way, I'm just kind of realizing that. This is quite raw. Like I said, I'm just discovering these things now. But I have been using writing as a way of healing all along. But I've kept that a secret because I thought I would be shamed for it. So that's a lot to think about, for me. First I came out of the closet as a memoirist, and now I feel like I'm coming out of the closet as a healer. I developed ways of using writing for myself that are very similar to shamanic journeys, and I achieved truly deep healing. And this just came very organically and naturally out of my writing practice. But I've never taught those in my workshops. And maybe I will, maybe I will now. I'll see. But most of the healing comes from sharing with an audience or sharing with readers. And it comes from layering and going deeper and asking in each revision, is there a deeper truth? And that, thank you, Stella, absolutely. Stella, I just wanted to, while you're here, give a shout out for your book. I can't think of the title of it right now. Type it in the comments. Stella's written a beautiful book based on her own experience. Let me think. What was I talking about? Oh yeah, the practice of writing straight into the secrets, straight into the shame, straight into the regret. Um, because then those heavy secrets are dissolved, for the writer and the reader. So have you heard the saying, take a stand for the and? Take a stand for the and. Um, I like it because it means we can do both, right? Um, so I think that I can take a stand for the and memoir can be critically acclaimed and connect strongly with readers and be healing for the writer, right? Those things can coexist. Um, when I think of Jeanette Walls and the Glass Castle, when I think of Elizabeth Gilbert in Eat, Pray, Love, when I think of Cheryl Strayed in Wild, and Tara Westover with Educated, their works of memoir are hugely successful by all professional standards. And I'm pretty sure those writers experienced a deep transformation and a deep healing in the writing. So, like if you think about it, for Jeanette Walls, I mean, right from the get-go, right in her prologue, she reveals how deeply ashamed she is that her parents are homeless. She and poor, and she that scene where she's in the town car in Manhattan and she drives past her mother sorting through a dumpster. And Liz Gilbert, the shame of leaving her perfectly good marriage, and Cheryl Strayed healed her heartbreak over losing her mom, and then coping with it by sleeping around and shooting heroin. And Tara Westover, shame for leaving her family and becoming educated and leaving behind her, like breaking out of her, the religious sect that she was a part of. So all healed by writing truth and creating great stories for the rest of us at the same time. So yeah. Ashes of My Dreams. Yes, Stella, thank you. Mm-hmm. Beautiful book. So, and it's funny because as I'm saying this, my confession about wanting to keep the healing a secret, and I kind of feel like you're saying, well, duh, Kathleen, of course, memoir can be, both excellent reading and be healing. Kind of like those lilies of the valley, like maybe it's just me who needed to understand that. And I'm also thinking, though, this is the other thing. I'm also thinking that maybe my feeling silenced and ashamed of the healing was a form of internalized sexism. Because this is the sacred work of the feminine. It's women's work, deep healing and honoring of women's lives and women's stories, alchemizing. Yeah. So I'm just kind of sharing with you as I'm contemplating these things. So that's what I have for you today. The gifts of memoir. That was 4, 5, and 6 together. The gift of healing the past. The gift of transforming shame into compassion, and the gift of dissolving secrets. And so these are some of the gifts that you receive as a woman who mines her own life for story, who uses her voice. And yeah. And I want to say too, I am opening spaces in my writing programs for those who want to work with me in 2019. So if you feel called, if you want to talk to me about your writing, or if you'd like to see if one of my group programs is a fit for you, or maybe you're a candidate for private coaching, you can send me a private message, or you can also contact me through my website, KathleenHamiltonMemoir.com. Yeah. I think that's it. Unless you have anything that you want to add. Oh, here's a comment from Stella. Thank you for sharing. So understand what you are saying. We need the stories. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, thank you. I'm so glad that you understand. Because this is very fresh and raw. But that's I'm kind of demonstrating today a part of what it is to write Deeper Truth Memoir. Just like this is what came through today. Alrighty, so I will see you next time. Truth and beauty, especially yours. Thanks for being here.